AST SpaceMobile has been one of the best performing stocks over the past month. Shares are up over 200%. And the company's got some really interesting deals lined up just in the month of May. But is this company a buy? What are investors getting? Is the hype worth it? That's what I want to dig into today, because this is one of those companies that absolutely could be an asymmetric kind of stock. But the risk profile is very different from a lot of the companies that I have in the asymmetric portfolio. So I want to dig through this company, why it's at least on my watch list, something I'm going to keep an eye on, because I think the technology and what they're building is potentially going to be much, much larger than their current market cap. But that doesn't mean that this is going to be a high probability of success for investors. And that's really the challenge today. So I'm going to dig through all that. My name's Travis Hoium. Thanks for watching Asymmetric Investing. Please subscribe here on YouTube for all my content. And thanks to this video sponsor, The Motley Fool. If you go to fool.com/ASYM, they'll give you their top 10 stocks to buy right now. Let's first go through what has happened with AST SpaceMobile over the past month or so. This is the stock chart. It's early trading on Monday, January 3rd. You can see shares are up 222% as I'm recording over the past month, but they're down about 5% today. So some of the hype that has happened over the past week or two has really started to wear off. So what in the world is going on with AST SpaceMobile? First of all, let's go through what this company is, what they do. They are building the first and what they say is only space-based cellular broadband network. So this is not quite a satellite broadband network the way that something like Starlink would be, where you need a satellite dish to actually connect to the network. You're going to be able to use this with your phone, with your regular smartphone. The way that I interpret this is something that's going to be built into phones in the future. So a lot of telecommunication companies are kind of getting out in front of this and making deals with AST SpaceMobile. AT&T and Verizon are the two big names there, and I'll talk about those two in just a second. The interesting thing is they're not actually operational yet. They don't have any revenue. And this is where you get to the risk profile. Yes, this may be a very high potential company, maybe a big market, but we have no idea what their financials are going to look like long term. It's just one of those companies that is in kind of research phase, and now they're getting into deployment phase. So targeting July or August for delivery of 5 Block 1 satellites to Cape Canaveral. And those first 5 satellites are expected to provide non-continuous service to the continental United States. They've expanded this, I believe, a little bit with the Verizon announcement, but they're really moving to this point where they're getting to commercial agreements with cellular networks. Now here's the challenge. I'll just cover this since it's in the presentation. Their operating expenses and cash burn. So you're going to add both of these things together. This is their operating expenses and their capital expenditures are going to have to be covered by their liquidity. So how much cash do they actually have on the balance sheet to execute before they get to the point where they're bringing in revenue, gross margin, and ultimately free cash flow to the business? This is really the challenge because they're in cash burn mode. As of the end of the first quarter, that improved slightly. They did have $212.4 million worth of cash and then additional liquidity as part of a senior secured credit facility. They also got another investment from Verizon just last week. But this is ultimately the challenge. Very, very high risk because you're in a position of can they actually get to the point where they're going to get to profitability. But let's look at some of those deals. This first one was on May 15th with AT&T, announced a definitive commercial agreement to provide access to everyday cell phones is what they call it. AT&T and AST SpaceMobile announced a commercial agreement to provide their first space-based broadband network direct to everyday cell phones. The two companies have been on this path since 2018, and this is another step forward. So not a ton of details about when this kind of product is going to be launching, exactly who's going to be targeted, but the goal with all of these telecommunications networks is to basically reduce their costs to serve rural areas by offloading this from the towers that they've been building, which are really expensive fixed costs that they have, to something like AST SpaceMobile. Maybe you don't have great service because it is a satellite connection as opposed to a cell tower connection, but you're going to be able to cover basically everywhere. So you get rid of dead zones and maybe even on balance provide a little bit higher service levels to a lot of people who are in rural areas, or at least moving through rural areas. The next deal, which I think was even a bigger deal, was an agreement with Verizon. They announced plans to target 100% geographic coverage of the United States and an agreement to share premium 850 megahertz cellular spectrum. So there were a couple of things involved in this. First was the financial aspect, $100 million investment from Verizon. $65 million of that was a commercial prepayment. So basically they're prepaying for their services. So Verizon will say, we're going to give you cash. You're going to give us services later. From AST SpaceMobile standpoint, you put that on your balance sheet as a prepaid revenue line item. You have to offer those services later. But again, when you're in investment phase and building out the commercial network, this is exactly the kind of deal that you're going to want to do because you're getting the cash up front. They also invested $35 million in convertible notes. So Verizon is getting upside if the stock continues to do well, because those convertible notes could convert into stock. CEO of AST SpaceMobile said this partnership will enhance cellular connectivity in the United States, essentially eliminating dead zones and empowering remote areas of the country with space-based connectivity. So again, this is a win-win for both companies. AST SpaceMobile gets a couple of big customers for their product. Verizon and AT&T basically get to say, hey, we're going to invest a little bit less in building out towers in rural areas. We're just going to offload that to these satellite connections, because they said that this is for everyday smartphones. So that's going to be the next step, is actually getting people with devices that can be connecting to satellites to offer that kind of service. Thanks to our friends at The Motley Fool for sponsoring this video. Visit fool.com/ASYM for the top 10 stocks to buy right now. So is this kind of connectivity even available on current smartphones? The answer is yes, at least in limited numbers and depending on what smartphone you have. I'm just looking at the iPhone here. You can see that to connect satellite connectivity, your phone must have compatible software. Before you go somewhere with no cellular or Wi-Fi coverage, you should update to the latest version of iOS. Satellite features are included with iPhone 14, 14 Pro, 15, and 15 Pro. So yes, if you have a relatively new iPhone, you have some satellite capabilities. I haven't actually seen this be something that Verizon, who's my service provider, is actually offering. And we're obviously at the early phases because AST SpaceMobile has not actually launched their satellites yet. So the capability seems to be there on at least some smartphones. The next step is integrating this with the telecom companies and actually offloading some of this service to satellites. So that will be the next big step. So these are all really nice steps in the right direction for AST SpaceMobile. My challenge with this business is, what's the actual payback? What do the financials look like long term? It's very possible that there's just not enough demand for satellite cellular networks to make this business profitable. The flip side of that would be, this is going to be one of only maybe a couple of satellite networks, and a lot of the biggest telecommunications providers in the US anyways are already signing up with them. So if they're able to put up hundreds, maybe thousands of satellites, you build out a network that's going to be very difficult for anyone else to compete with. Potential other upside would be one or two of these other companies just acquiring AST SpaceMobile. That was the first thing that I thought of when the Verizon deal came down. $100 million for Verizon isn't a ton of money, but they at least get some upside in the stock. And if things go bad, now they're on the capital stack on the debt side. So if the company runs into financial trouble, Verizon can just step in and potentially acquire the company. So a lot of moving parts here. It's a company that I'm very interested in because I think this is the kind of technology that's probably needed. If it works extremely well and it reduces some of the capital expenditures needed for some of the telecommunications companies, this could absolutely be a win-win, and AST SpaceMobile could have a lot of potential upside. But this is a company that doesn't yet have any revenue and yet has a $2 billion market cap. And that's where I'm really hesitant as an investor. This is a very, very high risk investment and just not one I'm ready to make yet, but definitely on my watch list, something that I'll probably be covering in the future here on Asymmetric Investing. But what do you think about AST SpaceMobile? Leave your comments, your thoughts in the comment section below. Don't forget to subscribe to Asymmetric Investing. Thanks for watching, everybody. See you here next time.